Sonnet 5 is finally here. I know we've all been really excited about... Oh, I'm sorry, I'm getting a phone call. What? Sonnet 5 didn't drop? Codex 5.3 dropped. That's not even a model by Anthropic. Oh, Anthropic put out a model too? Opus 4.6? Didn't we just get 4.5? Okay. Jokes aside, today's a very interesting day because we got 2 new models and I'm not here to talk about both. I really want to focus on Opus 4.6, which is kind of weird because they just put out an Opus model and it's rare that they put out iterations of the same model in the family the way they did here. Normally they put out a Haiku, then they put out a Sonnet, and they put out an Opus and rotate between all of these. Haiku needs some love desperately, so I hope they get to that soon and remember it exists. But for now, we have a new Opus, and it is the smartest AI coding model ever made. I hope that another model doesn't come out over the next few minutes. We'll talk about that in the near future, don't worry. Opus 4.6 is a phenomenal model. I've been using it all day across various things. Sadly, I did not get early access to Opus 4.6, so all of my testing is done today across me and other members of my team. I have a lot to say about this model. On one hand, it's really, really good. It's solving things that Opus 4.5 never would have been able to. But on the other hand, I feel like it's lost a tiny bit of the magic that I loved Opus 4 in the past. All of that said, the benchmarks look great. The new features they're adding look great, specifically this new orchestration layer with swarms and teams, really, really cool. The long-running parallel agent stuff looks really great. But you know what else is great? Today's sponsor. Long time no see. I almost forgot to film an ad for this one, so I'm just filming it right after that video. We're talking a lot about the differences between OpenAI and Anthropic. Do you know what they have in common, though? There's one really big, surprising thing that they both use that I think we can all learn a bit from. I'll give you a hint. T3 Chat does the same thing. It's WorkOS, the auth provider that almost all of these companies are using, both big and small. And there's a reason why. They really get your auth enterprise ready. It's the only auth you can really, really trust for these types of deals. And they also don't compromise on the DX. This is the same company that hired all the engineers that built Radix. They care deeply about full stack TypeScript development in software as a whole. I also think the admin portal is a big part too. Imagine I worked at Microsoft and I was hitting you up because I want to try out your product. Would you be ready to serve me? Would you be ready to handle whatever weird, obscure auth format my company expects? If I'm at some Fortune 50 company that's using Okta for everything, that's trying to burn their AI budget for the month, and I want to try out your product, can you auth me with Okta? Can you deal with all of these terrible services that no one should have to deal with? I know we couldn't, and we lost deals for this at T3 Chat, and that's why we made the move. A very, very expensive move that has cost us $0 because your first million users are free. So if you have between 0 and 1 million users, you have nothing to lose, and if you have more than that, congratulations. Check them out now at soydev.link/workos. So here we are, Opus 4.6. We're upgrading our smartest model. The new Opus 4.6 improves on its predecessor's coding skills. It plans more carefully, sustains agentic tasks for longer, can operate more reliably in larger code bases, and it has better code review and debugging skills to catch its own mistakes. And in a first for our Opus class models, 4.6 features a 1 million token context window in beta. Very interesting. The large context window is a huge change for what the model is capable of. They've been putting a lot of effort into things like compaction, where when you have too much going on in a thread, it can shorten that context and then keep going after. 1 million token context window means you don't have to do that as much, but it also means you're more vulnerable to context rot. So finding the right balance of how much context do you let stay in versus how much do you pull out is a delicate act. They also talk about how it's better at day-to-day work tasks like financial analysis, research, creating documents, spreadsheets, and presentations, and co-work as well. Cool. Not what we're here for. We're here for code. Let's be real. It did get some really crazy numbers, including an absurd score on humanity's last exam. They absolutely crushed ArcAGI, like destroying all of the highest scores before. This isn't V1. This is V2. This is the one that was built specifically to be impossible for agents and AI to do, and it's doing it. This bench has always been weird and difficult, but it's a really interesting bench in the sense that it was built specifically to be things humans are good at and agents are bad at. And now the harder version is getting into the 80% range, or close to it. We're right on the line of 70 now. Nuts. Also, meaningfully cheaper than GPT 5.2 Pro, but also slightly more expensive than standard GPT 5.2. I do want to take a sec to talk about price because I think it's an important thing to understand. They say here pricing remains the same at the $5 per mil in and $25 per mil out. But it's important to note that this price is significantly higher than a lot of other options you have. It's lower than Opus used to be, but it's still way higher than you would expect from other models. For example, GPT-5 was actually a big change for OpenAI's pricing, where previously with GPT-4 and 4.0, it was $2.50 per mil in and $10 to $15 per mil out. The 4.0 refresh that a lot of people use, the 2024 5.13 version, was $5 per mil in and $15 per mil out. But again, with GPT-5, they meaningfully changed this down to $1.25 in and $10 out. So remember, 5 and 5.1, $1.25 in, $10 out. Opus, $5 in, 4x higher, $25 out, 2.5x higher. Do you really think Opus is 2 to 4 times better than GPT-5 and 5.1? Maybe. I don't think I would go anywhere near that far. But to counteract things, OpenAI did bump the price for 5.2, and I would suspect 5.3 will maintain this price change. We don't know because 5.3 isn't on the API yet. 5.2 and 5.2 codecs both came in at $1.75 per mil in and $14 per mil out, putting it at roughly half the price per token overall. And you can see this in everything from your usage of the subscriptions to just looking at the actual cost if you are hitting the APIs. I can tell you from a lot of experience running a lot of these models over API with T3 chat that Anthropic is a disproportionately high bill relative to the amount of usage those models get on our platform. They just cost more. It is what it is. Token efficiency is also important to consider with this. When you're running these models for hours at a time, token efficiency starts to mean something very different. And one of the things they're really pushing is this idea that they can run the models for long windows of time. We tasked Opus 4.6 using agent teams to build a C compiler and then mostly walked away. Here's what it taught us about the future of autonomous software development. The thing they were talking about there is the new team orchestration. Coordinate multiple Claude Code instances working together as a team with shared tasks, inter-agent messaging, and centralized management. It's a new experimental feature that has caused my Claude Code to crash a lot, but it does actually seem really cool. Here I had it audit a pretty big code base, and it spun up 5 separate agents to go explore my different theories all in parallel and then bring back results. I haven't gotten it to trigger the more fancy parallel view just yet. I have been trying. It is a super cool thing. From my experience and what I've heard from others, it burns a ton of tokens, but does also meaningfully increase the quality of output for really big tasks that touch a lot of different things. They even have a TMUX mode if you want to see all of the actions going on in a multiplex view. Really cool. Does feel like they get what we want. But again, it does break things pretty consistently right now, and I can't get it to trigger reliably enough to confidently tell you how it is to use. I hope to get this working more consistently in the future so I can give you guys more feedback on it. But for now, it's a really cool seeming thing that I could kind of get to work, but seems to need a little more time in the oven before it's ready for us to really dive in on. But that doesn't stop Anthropic from diving in, as they have done now to build a full Rust-based C compiler from scratch, capable of compiling the Linux kernel. They should not have hid that this far in. Over nearly 2,000 Claude Code sessions and $20,000 in API costs, the agent team produced a 100,000-line compiler that can build Linux 6.9 on x86, ARM, and RISC-V. Okay, that's pretty cool. This article is full of tips about doing long-running Claude Code in Claude instances and also running in parallel. Seems really, really cool. Definitely a thing I'm going to explore in the future. But I'm not the only one exploring it because Cursor has also been building very similar things. They're working on a new, very long-running coding agent harness, and they just did a week-long run where it peaked at over 1,000 commits per hour across hundreds of different agents. This is super exciting stuff. This is where things are going to start going crazy when we see these gigantic tools can go for hours upon hours. There are problems with this, though. Specifically, the longer it goes, the likelihood that it has an error that it doesn't notice that becomes really bad later goes up. And the balance there is hard to strike. And also, when it takes longer to run, it costs more money and it wastes more time. So the likelihood that you'll take the time to steer it again after it runs for 10 hours to multiple days is not high. So it's a significantly higher failure rate, lower motivation to fix it when it does fail, and it's more expensive. So I don't know how long it will take. I think things are going to have to get a lot better before we see these types of things being done at many businesses often. And also, as Anthropic said, this was $20,000 of API credit for their run. This stuff's not cheap. Let the rich people figure it out as we all dwindle with our $200 a month subs and hope for the best. These long-running tasks really are the final thing we need to figure out here for much more to change in the developer world. It's already changing fast, but if we can get these things doing task durations that are 2 to 3x longer than they are now without human intervention, things are going to get nuts. This chart haunts me. This is how many hours of work can an agent do, not how many hours can it do it running, but how many hours of a human task can an agent do without human intervention. So previously, Opus 4.5 had a 50% success rate on tasks that would take humans up to 5 hours, and 5.2, which, again, these numbers just came out yesterday for 5.2, a multi-month-old model. It's going to be a bit before we see them for 5.3 or for Opus 4.6. But the jump here, especially from Opus 4.5 to 5.2 of like an hour and a half, is a very meaningful jump. That means there's a high chance that there are tasks that are failing because they're too hard and take too long for Opus that 5.2 can do. But what's really funny, as y'all know, is that 5.2 is slow, so it took 26 times longer than Opus did to complete the same task. So I am positive Opus is going to perform much better on this bench, but I want to talk about this part, because one of the things I like about Opus is how fast it feels to use and how convenient it is experience-wise. I know I'm the OpenAI guy, and y'all think that they're paying me because I like them so much. I get it, but at the same time, I just use it because they're better at code. That said, there are a handful of things I've reached for Opus for. In particular, things that involve less editing code in a code base, more using my computer. I still prefer Claude Code by a lot for things like dealing with random SSH credentials, or pulling configs off old computers onto my new computer, or figuring out where something is on my machine, or trying to change something in my bash profile or my fish or zish RCs. When I'm making changes to my computer, Claude Code still feels the best by far, and Opus 4.6 has made it feel slightly more consistent with that. I just did 2 separate migrations to new Linux machines, and the second one I did with Opus 4.6 was meaningfully smoother than the one I did with Opus 4.5. That said, there was a big difference, and this is the elephant in the room. As great as these benchmarks are, as great as it is at code, as great as it is at doing things that it could do before and a few things it couldn't, I have a problem. The problem isn't that it should have been Sonnet 5. Problem, it feels slower. It's taken like 5 to 10 minutes to do things that Opus 4.5 would do in 1 to 2. It's also slightly less pleasant to interact with. Not that it's like doing things wrong, but just talking to it feels a bit worse. It feels like there's a regression in its prose, to put it lightly. Like its ability to talk to you in a way that doesn't feel like a robot copy pasting from a template has meaningfully degraded. It's a silly example, but I did 2 audits across big code bases just to play with this. I want to show you these tabs back to back because it was jarring, but I ran this one. And since I ran this one, it got compacted and now the history is all screwed, so I can't show you what I wanted to there. But I thought ahead and took a screenshot. This screenshot. Notice anything? Want me to fix any of these? Want me to fix any of these? These are 2 different projects with 2 different prompts and 2 different sets of skills that I applied. Yet the format of the final output and the question it asks after are literally identical. This model feels a little more like it was pushed into a template for how it speaks and interacts. And while it is smarter, it is less varied because of this. And this does seem like a specific goal of the Anthropic team. Nobody's using Opus because it's the nicest to talk to or it's good at writing. They're picking Opus because it is the smartest model, as far as they are concerned. So indexing Opus on being a really good writer or being funny or clever is not useful, because that's not why people are spending the hundreds of thousands of dollars they are on tokens from Opus. They're doing it because it's the smartest. And if they can make it smarter, but also slightly less pleasant, that is a worthwhile trade-off. But when it comes at the cost of some speed too, it hurts a little bit more. Especially because another model happens to have dropped the same day that we'll talk about in another video coming very soon, that has done the opposite trade-off, and it has felt very, very good. I'm increasingly entertained by this particular tweet, so I wanted to read it. Sonnet 5 drops tomorrow, and I've heard from 3 separate sources inside Anthropic that the benchmarks they're sitting on would mass retire every model released in 2025. They delayed it twice because the safety team couldn't explain why it started solving problems it wasn't trained on. This is either entirely false or a really funny thing to have come out, because there's a real chance that Sonnet 5 has become Opus 4.6. The model behaves differently enough, and their desire to keep the cost as high as they have would make sense for them to do this. Hard to know for sure, though. I am very curious what the hell is going on with Sonnet and why we haven't had a new thing come out with that. Like, did they just finish the Opus 4.6 run and want to get that out first? Are they delaying Sonnet 5 because they want to let this have a moment and make some more money off the higher token prices? What are they going for here? Historically, the majority of usage on Anthropic models has been Sonnet by a lot, but the price decrease in Opus from 4 to 4.5, combined with the meaningful increase in its capability to the point where even I started using Anthropic models again, seems to have been a massive shift in what people are using Anthropic for, and I suspect they are now somewhat addicted to that difference in cost, specifically the amount of money they can make when they're charging significantly more than they do for Sonnet. And remember, even Sonnet 4.5 is more expensive than the most expensive OpenAI models you would reasonably use for code. $3 per million tokens in, as long as you're under 200K, and then the price doubles as it gets longer. And then for output, it's $15 per million, as long as the full context is under 200K. But if it's over, it goes up to $22.50, nearly the price of Opus. But here's where it gets real expensive. If you take advantage of Opus's ability to do million token contexts, or even just go over 200K, your price for input tokens doubles to $10 per million tokens in. And your output price also nearly doubles to almost $40 per million tokens out. That is absurdly expensive. But also, the fact that they introduced the larger token window with the exact same general constraints that we saw with Sonnets does lead me towards that conspiracy that Sonnet 5 became Opus 4.6. I would not be surprised in the slightest in either direction there. They do call it the new Opus is massively better at retrieving needle in a haystack type problems where it's trying to get some hidden piece of information across vast amounts of text. It got a 76% score, where Sonnet 4.5 got an 18.5%. I do want to call out some fun information here. You might remember Tune, which is the token-oriented JSON alternative to make it easier for models to encode data. That doesn't only make the data smaller, but it actually increases retrieval success. I bring this up not because I think everyone should move from JSON to Tune. I bring it up because they ran benchmarks across various models with various formats to see what their retrieval success was. GPT-5 Nano did a great job at 90.9% success with Tune, and even with JSON Compact, it got roughly the same score. Grok 4 Fast, being the lobotomized model it is, got below 60% for every case, performing worse than a Nano model and worse than Gemini 2.5 Flash, which is a model that is a year plus old now. So how did Haiku do, the model that's built for this? Haiku 4.5, which came out last year in October, got the same score as the lobotomized Grok version. It had a 4 to 5x higher error rate than 5 Nano did. Anthropic models are bad at retrieval through large contexts. And this isn't even the million token context. This is the 200K token context that Haiku has. You guys might also remember that crazy drama last year where people thought Sonnet and Claude Code had suddenly got way dumber. The reason why, as far as they discussed, is that they were accidentally routing people to the version of the model that handled large context, even when it didn't need it. And the large context version was dumber. So again, spending more money to use more tokens, which inherently lowers the likelihood of success because of context rot, but also the version of the model that can do that is worse, proven by Anthropic's own research. So don't rush to go use this because you think it'll magically be better because bigger means better. It does not in this case. If you have very specific needs where large amounts of context will benefit the model, I would question your logic because almost every single time that is incorrect. But if you really, really need it, it is cool that they do it. But there's a reason the entire industry has moved away from just massively increasing context window size, because these models are better at finding information using tools like Bash. Again, when you look at the 256K version versus the 1 mil version, you go from 76% success to 93%. And to be fair, both of the old Sonnets bombed at this. The 256K doing worse than the 1 mil because the 1 mil version, which is again a different model, was trained to do retrievals because there's no other purpose in that size of context. But it seems like they figured it out more deeply with Opus 4.6. It's better at diagnosing software failures. It's better at multilingual. It's better at long-term coherence with vending bench in particular, which apparently Grok slaughtered. So they might have intentionally left Grok off that. Cybersecurity vulnerability reporting is much higher too. I don't know if you guys have heard this, but a lot of the recent reports that have been generated that cause all these crazy CVEs like the Next.js one were largely discovered through using AI tools to test lots of different theories and make their own theories themselves. I can't help but notice that OpenAI models aren't on this one, even though they are on some of the others. My suspicion is that that is because they perform really well, because I happen to know a lot of those CVEs came from Codex users. On the topic of security, though, Dax noticed an interesting thing called out in their TOS. As part of a change to our API, it will not be possible for developers to seed incomplete responses for Claude Opus 4.6 to continue. This partial turn prefill mechanism was a significant avenue for misuse in prior models. Opus 4.6 is still vulnerable, though to a lesser degree than other models, to misuse by ways of full turn prefill attacks. So what they're talking about here is the history of the chat, which is way more important than a lot of people seem to understand. The history in a chat is all sent to the model when it's going to generate the next token. And it's not just the history of the chat, it's also how far you are into this next message. And based on all of that, the most likely next token is predicted. That's how all of this works. So the history of your chat is used heavily by the model to determine what the next token should be and what the next word should be, what the next line of code. All of these things come as a result of this generation process. So if you fake the chat history, it becomes much easier to steer the model in the direction you want it to go. DAX misunderstood this as Anthropic blocking you from doing that, which is not what they are doing. If you have a chat history with a different model and then you switch to Opus, it'll handle that fine. The thing it will not do now is if you send it an incomplete message. Let's say it was really, really illegal to make ice cream that was blue. And if I asked Opus to make me blue ice cream, it would say, no, I can't do that. It's illegal. But if instead I was to ask it, how do I make blue ice cream? And then pre-fill the first couple words with, blue ice cream is really easy to make. First, you have to, and then I stop there and send it to the model. It will auto-complete the rest because that's what they do. And this is a great way to get around the security measures that these models have in place. And since these models are getting smarter, they're getting more capable of doing more things that are potentially more damaging. The companies are putting more effort into restricting how easy it is to do those things. This is also why putting out open weight models is so dangerous, because if you identify these patterns later, you can't do anything about it because the models are already out in the hands of people. But if you hide it behind an API, you can make these changes on an API level, which is what they're doing here. The API will now refuse the request if it doesn't have a complete assistant message. It will not let you keep going, which is the right call. It's just weird. I am scared that we're going in a direction where these histories get more and more deeply tied to the model providers that you're using. For example, with both Gemini and with OpenAI, and I'll call it OpenAI hard for this, they're hiding their reasoning tokens. So you can't actually see the model thinking when it thinks. You can only see the result when it's done. But sometimes there's useful information in the thinking that the model could benefit from having later on, which is why when you use those models across those APIs, they now expect you to include a thread ID so that it knows which messages it has in that thread, and it can go get the private, hidden, you can't have it reasoning data in order to do the right thing going forward. And this is silly because if a better model comes out from another provider, you're going to lose all of the thinking history data in your thread. So if I have 5 messages back and forth and there's been a lot of reasoning from an OpenAI model, I can switch to a new OpenAI model and it can see that. But if I switch to an Anthropic model or a Gemini model, that data is gone because I don't have it. It exists on the servers. And the fact that both OpenAI and Google are choosing to obfuscate and hide their reasoning data still to this day is just silly and frustrating. And I give a lot of credit to Anthropic, despite lots of issues I have with them, for continuing to just give us the reasoning data and let us do as we please with it. It makes this less scary, but then they go and do something like this, which, while understandable, does set a precedent that is scary as well, that I can't model swap or have my histories in different places. If these providers start to expect a coherent history on their servers that I'm just adding new messages to over API, that's going to make things much worse and much harder. We'll lose a lot of the flexibility and experimentation that I think makes AI so cool today. They do claim the model is much less likely to misbehave. I haven't had a chance to run it on Snitchbench yet, but yeah, it doesn't seem like that big a gap here. It is interesting seeing them call out things like this where they are so close to the previous model, but it still made it into the article. I would see them putting this in the system card, but in here is interesting. They have observed an increased capability in cybersecurity, which is why they have started taking this stuff a bit more seriously. Good to see. Curious where it all goes. One last really cool change on the API side is that we now have effort levels. We didn't have this before. We just had to hard code token limits for reasoning or turn reasoning on and off entirely. Now they have effort levels similar to every other model. You can choose low to high for how much you want it to use, as well as a max option too. And apparently there's a US only inference option, which means that if you're not using this, some of your inference is running offshores, but you get a 10% price increase if you do that. Actually, on the topic of price, before I forget, you get a reward for watching this far into the video. If you are using any of Claude's subscriptions right now and you go to the Anthropic dashboard, go to the usage tab, you'll see something interesting. Explore Opus 4.6 with extra wiggle room. Try our newest model with $50 in extra usage, even if you hit your plan limit. $50. Go grab it. Enough just reviewing other people's takes. How do I actually feel about it after a day of use? Mostly good, but I have my reservations too. As I mentioned before, it is a lot more thorough, which is good because it ships bad code less often. I had multiple bugs I was dealing with my new auth service, which is coming out very soon. Shoo. It's the easiest way to set up auth. It's 2 lines of code and you finally can let users sign in without a bunch of hassle. Very proud of it. Very excited. Free and open source once I'm ready to push the repo up. I did most of the work for this project in Codex. And Codex did a great job. Codex does not know convex quite as well as Opus does. So I chose to do some work in my convex example using the Opus models. I did not realize how many random things it broke when I did that, because Opus 4.5 noticed that my encryption method for tokens was not compatible with what Convex expected, and it recommended I change it. And it did, in one place. That encryption was being used in at least 5 different places, and this is the thing that Opus 4.5 was really, really bad about. It felt as though it would get excited when it saw the opportunity to make a fix, and it would go do it, regardless of if the fix was complete or correct. It didn't feel like it would go the extra mile to go collect the additional context that it needed. I'm not saying 4.6 does, but it does do it better. It's still not quite at the same level of thoroughness, where it just kind of feels like the Codex models will sit there and read files for 15 plus minutes before they even start. It's the whole measure twice, cut once philosophy. It seems as though Anthropic realized they were on the wrong side of this one overall and are steering the other way, but it's still not great at it. I have a lot of silly examples, but one that I have here where I had it do a review of a big code base looking for React best practice violations. I told it, here is the code base, which is a monorepo with lots of different pieces. Analyze this for good, bad, and ugly use of React. Use your React best practices skill and your own research to figure out what patterns here that you're seeing might cause us problems in the future. And it did that for just the web app. I sadly do not have a screenshot of that point, but I ended up telling it, hey, what about the mobile app? And it was like, oh yeah, that's React Native too. I should have done that. I'll go do that. Annoying. So while I was not impressed with how well it gathered the context, I was impressed with how well it succeeded at solving the problem. Even with the example I gave earlier with the auth thing, 4.6 was able to fix the bug that 4.5 introduced. That doesn't mean there's some massive gap in quality. Honestly, I could probably have gotten 4.5 to fix the bug too, but 4.6 took no effort at all. I just handed a screenshot of the error and it went, found the bug, and fixed it. I may or may not have run that in parallel with another model that also figured it out, but that's for another video about GPT 5.3, because this video is about Opus. It also just kind of makes dumb suggestions sometimes. Like in my shoe code base, again, experimental early auth provider, I asked it to do a security audit, and it found the stupidest things in the world. The first issue it had was placeholder secrets, because in the stock.env, I had base tier like replace me environment variables for session, pairwise, and Google auth secrets. Those were obviously placeholders, and while yes, we are invalidating for non-empty, we're not deploying them. They're .example files. No, like this is not a real problem. Not only putting this in the list, but putting this in critical is absurd, like genuinely. And then right below it, real Google OAuth credentials on disk in .env and .env.prod. How the fuck am I supposed to do this if I don't have OAuth credentials on my machine? I do have 2 deployments of my OAuth config on Google, one for dev and one for prod, but it doesn't know that. All it knows is it saw credentials in these files because I need those credentials in those files to do the work, and concluded this is a critical security issue. If I had just hired a new engineer at my company and they came to me with these 2 critical security issues, I would question why I hired them. So the model still makes really dumb mistakes here and there. These are just bad things to report. A lot of the rest just fundamentally don't understand the project and what matters. And spoiler for the video coming up soon, this was not the case with another model that happened to come out today. So with all of that said, how am I feeling? Good, but not great. I wasn't picking Opus for how smart it was, which is a little absurd because it's so expensive. It's silly when you think about the fact that the option that's 2 to 4 times more expensive than the smartest option is dumber. But it was really nice to use. It really was. I liked using Opus 4.5 for just dealing with my computer and random one-off stuff, and also for design work here and there, and occasionally its knowledge of convex was really useful. 4.6 hurt a little on the speed. I definitely lost some of that, and that was sad to see. It's worse to talk to, which is a big part of why I liked it, not because I would use it as my therapist, but it felt nice as I planned how I would configure my system with it. It has meaningfully reduced the error rate of the things it does, which has been great for me. For everything from configuring my systems to making sweeping changes to different example paths to real SDK changes in my code bases. But it still has that touch of eagerness that I would almost call stupidity that results in it doing weird things sometimes. So if you're using this model and you're not paying close attention to where it brings you, it might bring you somewhere shitty. I would say that this model is a 5 to 10% improvement in some ways and a 3 to 5% loss in others. The speed is a little bit bigger of a hit, I'll be real. I don't know what the actual numbers are. It's hard to get those reliably nowadays, especially since we learned the endpoints you hit via the subscriptions are different from the ones you hit over API and have entirely different performance characteristics. That sucked to learn. So what do I recommend? The same thing I always do, that you play with it yourself. There are so many cool tools and models and subscriptions and services and harnesses and ways to build with all of this stuff. The only way you're going to know what you like is if you play with it. And this isn't the same as learning a new programming language where you have to go and relearn everything you've ever done and throw away the basics. You will have to do that when you start moving to AI tools initially, but once you've done it, you've pretty much made it the majority of the way, and everything from that point is incremental changes and just like learning how to work with a different coworker more than it is learning a new language to do work in. And if you think about things that way and you take advantage of these tools, you will figure out what works the best for you. Anyways, 5.3 video coming very, very soon. I may have had a couple weeks of early access, so I have even more thoughts there. I cannot wait to share, but until next time, peace nerds.